My friends, welcome to another episode of Diner Talks with James. I'm James, and I'm super pumped to be hanging out with you all today in the diner. Y'all, I'm thinking about starting a merch line. Would you be interested in merch? Is that something you're intrigued by? Like mugs and other diner paraphernalia, maybe a nice fork. Anyway, you think about it, right? You want to, what do you need? You want a sweatshirt? Let's talk about it, y'all. Shoot me a message. Let me know if you're interested, if you'd be intrigued by having a little bit of diner love in your life. But I'm thinking about starting something because I think it'd be fun, just to spread some love about the cool conversations that we've been able to be a part of here in the diner. All right, y'all. Let's get to this week's episode. My man, Joshua Rivedal. Did I say your name right, brother? Is that close enough? Hang on one second. What
you
is
did.
it? I
you
did
got
it.
it.
All right, great. That's awesome. Coming up to the diners, my man, Joshua Rivedal. He is the creator and founder of Changing Minds, a mental health-based curriculum, and the I'm Possible project. Josh has been a friend for a few years, but he's one of those dudes that we only catch up so infrequently, but it doesn't matter because it's immediately connection. And I'm just excited for you all to get to hang out with him. In the 10 years that he has spoken about suicide prevention and mental health, 400 organizations across US, Canada, and UK, and Australia, he has truly impacted lives. He's also a stand-up comic. You might be able to tell that. We'll see. I'll be the judge of that. I'll tell you that. He's a professional actor and author of 8 books. That's cool. He lives in Philadelphia, loves to cook, and recently grew a pretty mediocre looking mustache. I agree. And I'm excited to bring my man out right now. Shout out to my boy, Joshua Rivedal.
Yes, James, me and the mustache say hello. It's getting smaller and smaller. It's going from here to here. So we're like, you caught me on a decent day.
Okay, good, man.
Also, I just want to say, like, I'm down for your merch. Like, I'm hoping for a James Robillata air fryer, actually.
Yep.
And measuring cup set. That's what I'm here for. That's my vote.
We're gonna do it. I mean, these places will put your logo on anything. So
this diner, the diner talks. Come on, man. Sponsored by.
Then you could have mozzarella sticks while we're in the diner. It's perfect.
Oh, baby, yes. Here for it.
Josh, how you been, brother? You doing well?
Bro, yeah, mostly. I mean, to give you an honest answer, there's ups, there's downs, but like mostly life is really good. Like there's lots of beauty and I'm freaking grateful, dude.
Yeah, I love that, brother. We're going to get into some of those ups and some of those downs. But, this show's called Diner Talks with James. So we got to kick it off the way we do. And I need to know, man, do you have a favorite late night guilty pleasure? And, maybe you're someone who eats a little healthier nowadays. And you're like, well, back in the day I did this, but, now I'm just eating like low fat popcorn. I don't know, whatever you're doing. What's your favorite late night move?
Just popcorn kernels. That's it. I'm macrobiotic now. A lot of chewing. I've taken to lately in advance. I make pesto, and so I'll like dip like pretzels or like veggies in the pesto because it's a little. I mean, there's a lot of fat in that, and like cheese and like nuts and basil. But like I'm trying to eat healthier these days. But it used to be like chips, man. I love me some chips, and I got to stay away because them things are addictive. I'm a chip connoisseur.
Yeah. Did you have a favorite flavor of chip or brand of chip? We're not brand loyal here in the diner, so feel free to share.
Oh man, kettle chips. There's a great chip you can only find in Cincinnati, in the Cincinnati region. I forget what it's called, but it's this like sort of sweet, spicy barbecue chip, and it's crunchy. And they make a really baller pork rind too. And I had it delivered to my house one time. I was like, I'm going to order these. And I thought I was getting bags of chips. And it was a big like bag, like a garbage bag full of these chips in a box. And it took me a little while to finish that. I was like, I'm going to take this box next to my bed. I'm going to dip in.
But you still love them.
Yeah. It's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had to give the pork rinds away because I was starting to develop high blood pressure. I'm serious. And so like that was sort of the impetus for me to start eating a little healthier. Actually, it was a couple years ago.
Yeah. I love the what's the level up for the pork rind? Like the chicharron, right? It's got it's almost got the little fat nuggets on it as well. Those are delicious.
Hell yeah. And sometimes they have it's chicharron con pelo, which is just a little they still got a little bit of the hair on it, but it's still fried and delicious.
Is that true? The chicharron?
Yes.
I was like, is it pelo hair?
It is. Yeah. You love that fuzz.
Yeah.
That crunchy fuzz. That's the name of my band, Crunchy Fuzz.
I've heard. Yeah, I've found you on Spotify.
A lot of polka.
Chips. Chips is always a classic move, but we got to come back to this pesto move, brother. First off, most people don't have pesto laying around like that, so that's amazing that you're investing in pine nuts the way you are. But it is. I don't know if I've ever used pesto as a condiment, but now I'm wondering why I've never used pesto as a condiment. No, like it's I love delicious. It on pasta. Yeah, it's outrageous.
Yeah, you could take like naan or like pita or something, heat it up a little bit, like dip, some carrots, whatever. It's all good. And I don't use pine nuts because they're crazy expensive. So I use like cashews and pecans. Just a little pro tip for the diner folks out there.
Wow, look at this.
Save some cash.
We have already leveled up out here. The Italian in me is crying that you don't use pine nuts, but that's fine. I suppose you can put a whole bunch of other things in there.
Yeah, you can. You can make it whatever you want. It's your pesto, James.
That's fair. Yeah, and that's the title of my book. It's your pesto, James. It's a work in title of progress. You live currently in Philly, great town. And is that where you were born and raised? You raised it in Eastern Pennsylvania?
Close by Trenton, which is like 45 minutes, a little northeast. So like Hood Light, so like Diet Hood is where I grew up in Trenton. Yeah. And I lived
Trenton's seen some stuff.
It's seen some stuff, and it's not going to talk about it.
Yeah.
We don't talk about it, but I grew up there till I was 12. We were like kind of in poverty. Like we were like an inch away from government cheese, no shame, whatever. And it was 5 of us in a 1-bed apartment, and we did our best, but that was Trenton, and we got out. We got out.
Yeah. Where'd you fall in the lineup of everybody in there? Where were you age-wise?
Oh, the middle. So I was like, sister and I are Irish twins. She's a year older. And then my brother is almost 5 years younger. So I'm like definitely the middle kid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They forgot about my birthday a couple of years. And then what's funny is I told my mom about this, not to like call her out, but just to say, hey, remember when this happened? She's like, I don't remember. I was like, my birthday again? Or the 2 times you guys forgot about it? I was like, middle child.
That is cool. Classic middle child. And if my wife was in the room right now, she would be snapping her fingers because she loves to talk about being the middle child and the trauma therein.
There is some. I mean, there certainly could be. I feel like sometimes that falls under like astrology and like what do you call it, Myers-Briggs, where it's like you listen to the things that you want to hear. It's like, yeah, of course I like walks on the beach. Of course I'm an introvert. Like, of course I'm a middle child. Yeah. So it's like, for me, it's like balancing awareness versus like, what's the real story versus what you're, saying? Because there are some like funky little traumatic things that happen, but there's also like wonderful stuff too that can be used as assets later in life. I'm a nurturer, Yeah. That's a good thing.
Yeah, I agree. Sounds like the glass is half full over there, brother. I like that.
This glass is going well. It's coffee, baby. Yeah. I can't read metaphors, by the way.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, you take your time. Growing up, you said close to the poverty line. And then you said you were able to get out. What does that mean? Like what shifted in that enabled you all to whatever get out means to you?
Yeah, so I think the mindset was always like the poverty that we experience is like temporary, So it wasn't a mindset as much as it was just this is where we're at. But I think a couple of things, like we as kids got older, so my mom was able to contribute in terms of joining like the paid workforce. I mean, we were a workforce in and of ourselves as 3 children, right? I mean, that's a challenge. But so that, and then when I was a kid, my parents bought a piece of property in a place called Jackson, New Jersey, which is Six Flags Great Adventure, if people are familiar with that. And it's relatively close to the Jersey Shore. And so we bought it on the side of town that there was nothing, and it was sandy, and we built, but we didn't get to live there right away because the surveyor that surveyed the property for my parents said for some reason that it was okay. Like we built like 50 feet of our house on somebody else's property, and there was a lot of litigation, and the surveyor died, during the process, and it was just a hot mess. And so we weren't able to, and being in scholarship poverty, we didn't have the money to sort of finish that process and to do the legal stuff. But finally, sort of all these factors came about. Mom joined workforce, things changed. And so we moved out there. And then some of my dad's job, he's like a civil servant, and pay freezes kind of they kind of let that up and stuff. So there's all these different factors. And then for me, I think, it was also like age 19, I left home. Like I did a year of community college, and that was me getting out of that, so that's what happened there.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Y'all got put through the ringer there. Then the surveyor died, and it's just like a tragedy of errors, not a comedy of errors. I mean, looking back at it, I guess we could laugh a little bit at it, but in the moment, that's horrific, especially as some people that are trying to do the right thing and do right by their family and by their lives. That's really frustrating to have those kind of errors go against you.
Yeah, I can imagine that. And I think, to a degree, because my dad was really kind of unwell, and you just don't know these things as a kid. You don't have these words, but he was frustrated. He was angry. He was abusive, somewhat physically, but emotionally. And he also had like something called retinitis pigmentosa. So he couldn't see beyond this, and his vision was limited. So he's dealing with a physical disability. So I think all these frustrations and things contribute to him just to being wildly unhappy. And so I can, as much as I don't like that man too much, he's not with us anymore. I hearing you say that, and that's tragedy of errors and stuff, it just made me sort of have like an aha moment. Like, here's another element of empathy I can have for that person, So Thank you for that, James.
Well, certainly not my intention, but if it was helpful, that's beautiful.
Cool.
Yeah. I mean, forgiveness is your own process for sure, brother.
Yeah. Dude, I say that all the time, man. Forgiveness is not for you, for the other person, it's for you.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly, man. Exactly. The so when it comes to young Josh, what was he like? What were some things that you were into? What'd you want to be when you grew up? Like, was it always stand-up comedy and talking about mental health prevention? A lot of young kids think about that
all the time, dude.
What were some things that you were into, man? And what'd you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be Dr. Pepper. No, and a hamster trainer. No, I really, I think, my first, there's two things. Like, my first exposure to really anything, because we went to church so much, like 3 times on Sundays, 3 services, 1 on Wednesday. And then my parents were involved all the time during the week. And it's a bigger story than that. But so I was like, okay, like initially it was like preacher. And then I was like, to me, that was like, this kind of feels lame. Like, I'm 7. This is not what I'm here for. Yeah. And then I really, like, I sang in church, and I saw my parents acting in church. And then like, I started acting. And so I really wanted to be a singer and an actor. And I pretty much followed through with that for a long time. Yeah. And so that was really exciting. And in fact, I want to show you this because I've always been very creative. But when I was 9, I don't know if it's really kind of hard to see because I think there's like I made this, I was cross stitching. I've always been very creative, and like, I needed an outlet. And I think it was, if I could go back and look, I'd be like, maybe that was for the anxiety. Maybe that was for that I didn't have the words for, but I made this thing. It's like a 5x8 or something. And like, I just spent like ages 9 and 10 cross stitching and singing and being a little jerk. I don't
Yeah.
know. I talked a lot of smack for a young kid that had no reason to be talking smack.
Sure, yeah.
So
Sometimes the wittiness is just coming out, though.
yeah, it did at times for
The
sure.
yeah, I mean, first off, that cross stitch is beautiful. You certainly don't associate cross stitch with a 9-year-old. I don't think I barely had enough patience. Like, I was like, no, Velcro. I don't have patience to tie my shoes, right? Let alone to sit down and do something as laborious and repetitive as cross stitch.
Dude.
Yeah.
No, it's like that, and I stocked up on life alerts. You know, it was like I became a 90-year-old grandma, like at the age of 9. Like it worked for me though.
Yeah.
The nice shawl and everything.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. You said that sometimes the anxiety, maybe, you weren't self-aware enough or had the vocabulary or the whatever enough to self-diagnose as anxiety. But looking back at it, is that what you would call it?
I certainly would. I can actually both depression and anxiety. I can, knowing what I know now and being such a student of mental health and mental illness and the work that I do, I can definitely look back and see elements of these conditions developing and at times worsening, but not having the words, right? So and even just how I move, like, and how, I mean, Rome is a baby, but he's came out with this personality that's maybe a little bit of you, a little bit of Tina, but he's his own person, man. And so, and I think, that for me too. And so just the way I move, and I've always been kind of a fidgety person. And so that's part of it. But then you exacerbate, some of these things that we're born with environmental things. Like you have a parent who's yelling all the time. You live in an environment that's small and that's different than what other people are doing, where they have a little more room. You can't go outside. I was very acutely aware, and my siblings weren't, of them talking about their financial issues, which we had when I was a younger child. And so that kind of made me feel insecure about the state of security, really. And then just also like being yelled at and things like that. Like there's an internal thing. I think there's a survival element to that. Like, oh my gosh, if I don't tone that down or figure that out or get them to stop, like I might not survive, so it's very primitive in a sense. It's that amygdala in the back that's screaming, protect me, right? So I definitely think there's some elements of anxiety as that little Josh, for sure.
Yeah, hell yeah, dude. Hell yeah. It's powerful to hear you talk about it and recollect at it. And it's also it's always interesting talking about childhood. I'll call it trauma. I'm not sure if that's how you identify it, but I'll call it that, and feel free to change that word to what's more appropriate. But it's very interesting to think about how that has then in turn shaped who you are today, and the work that you're doing today with being such a mental health advocate. But in the moment, that's not what the goal was. As you said, the goal was survival. The goal was, let's figure it out. The goal was, I also hear you, telling me that you had great listening skills and that you were a bit of an empath, right? That you kind of like felt and you carried some of your what your parents were going through or trying to do or whatnot. And you said your siblings were a little less aware of that. And to be so blissfully ignorant in that, what sounds like would have been lovely. But that just wasn't a choice that your brain allowed you to make. And that's powerful, man. And then, so when you all moved over to Jackson, and that sounds like that's more like high school age now. What were you like at high school? Were you constantly looking for a way to get out? Were you super involved so that you got to go home later, or like what did that look like?
Yes, all of that. Yeah, I'd always been that way. Even before that, but high school was the first time I went to public school. We went to the school that the church ran, which is always a great recipe. But we went to that. I went to that school up through 8th grade, with the exception of 4th grade. I was homeschooled. But high school, so yeah, I was finding myself. Like I had just kind of gotten out of this very sheltered environment, And then I realized there's this whole other world of other people and ideas and things. And I clung to what I knew only because it was only what I knew, even if I didn't agree with it. And so I remember being on the football team as like 15 and like trying to proselytize some of these kids. Like, what? And it didn't help that I was like 5'2" and like 110 pounds. And like I didn't go through my growth spurt yet. Yeah. So I was like, who is this like twig who can't play, who's telling us all about the good news? Like, so that is how it started. But then I started to grow and I was finding extracurriculars. And so I did the plays, I did the musicals, and I, anything artsy and creative. And it got to the point where like that even took over and that superseded the academics, and I didn't appreciate the learning side. And it was just like, this is my outlet. And I look back at it and I'm like, that was my gang, like that was my tribe. Because what do gang members and organized crime, what are they're looking for camaraderie, they're looking for safety and security, etc. Right. So, and I've spoken at juvenile detention centers and with children in the justice system. And I see myself there. I could easily see, even though I don't, look and sound like a lot of the young people who are there, I see that. So I feel so very fortunate to have found those places. So I was growing, I was learning, and I knew at a certain point, I was like, I also had a job. I got a job during the summer working at Six Flags. It's like the photo guy out of the front of the park. And I did a few other things as well. And so summertime was work. And then senior year was work on the weekends and sometimes in the evening. So it was anytime that I could be away from home, I'd be away from home. And so it was like, get a job, get a car, so you can go where you want and do what you want and pay for all that stuff. And then show business is going to be your escape. It's going to be your way out. And so initially, now I do show business work, kind of combining with mental health work or for some societal reason or to do it for work. But it initially it was like escapism. It was like, this is the thing that's going to take me away from this place. Yeah. And it's grown, it's changed, but yeah. So
yeah. In musical theater, there's always that, they call it the want song, where there's that moment that the protagonist often is kind of like, this is what I need, right? Like, I'm not going to give away my shot from Hamilton, or I want to be a part of this world, and and Little Mermaid. Like, we know the big want songs in a lot of Disney movies and plays and stuff like that, and I do a lot of improv comedy, and in musical improv, they talk about how you need to find your want. And the want isn't just like, well, I want to do theater, or I want a new bike, or I want this. It's that deeper, right? It's like, well, why do you want to do theater? Why do you want the bike? What does the bike represent? What does the theater represent? What does the work represent? And so to hear you blatantly name that, escapism was the want, was the drive, is powerful. In your world, as you were close with your siblings now, correct?
Now, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, now. Is in recalling your childhood, and maybe this is something that y'all don't touch with the 10-foot pole, I'm not sure, but in recalling your childhood, kind of going back to that point where it's like, I noticed this and my siblings were ignorant to it. As you all talk about your experiences growing up, how has that been in processing? Does it turns out everybody kind of saw it, or were you just the only one who was observant, or did you take the brunt of a lot of it?
It's really interesting. So we didn't name the word abuse until Thanksgiving of, I want to say 2019. Okay. 18 or 19. The last few years have been a blur, obviously, for a few people. But so that was really huge, because I was saying it for a couple years prior, and so I'm 38 in 3 days. Mm-hmm. And so,
happy birthday.
Second. But to be in my early 30s and to sort of start to recognize that I experienced emotional and physical trauma abuse from my dad, and then to be able to name it, and then to be able to talk about it in a room with people who also experienced, well, who I didn't actually know. I knew he was pretty horrible emotionally to my sister.
Mhm.
And I felt that my brother never got any of it. But they were around longer than I was. And it turned out that most all of this stuff that happened, it started to happen as we got a little older, and it happened when my mom was at work, because they kind of worked opposite. And so like some of the bigger physical side of things. And so naming that and talking about it for me was incredibly healing, to be able to say that. And I also know too that often men don't deal with their abuse, if at all, and on average until their mid 40s, and women in their mid 30s. So I feel like, I have, and I'm still processing and growing and learning from it. And there's other elements to expand upon and to learn from, and to dig deep. And I mean, even in the past couple of weeks, I'm like, oh my gosh, this, but to have that 10-year jump on the average, and then to be able to share that in some of my presentations, and to be able to share that with the people I care about, and to be able to share that with people who are struggling, and to say, hey, like, this is what happens when you're to your brain when you experience this, right? And you might not experience all of these things, but you're 30, you're 40, you're 50, you're 18. This could be a predictor of why, you're experiencing cardiopulmonary disease, or why you're more inclined toward addiction or substance misuse or suicidal ideation or whatever, or elements of all of those, right? And so it also means it's not set in stone, or a death sentence, or set in stone. Really, it's something that we can learn about and grow from, and use to our advantage to know these things, right? So, but anyway, back to my siblings. It's interesting because they deal with it in their own way, and I found out that my brother was physically abused, and beaten a little bit, and my sister was less so, but the emotional scars that I see from her are pretty big, and
Yeah.
we've talked, and all of us have talked about that in different ways. And we all have different, I wrote a play called The Gospel According to Josh, and then became Kicking My Blue Jeans in the Butt, which became part of the major chunk of the work that I do on campuses. And, but I always say, like, if we were all playwrights, we'd have 3 different plays for sure.
Yeah. Which is fascinating, right? That 3 people could come out of a situation with 3 completely different plays, but at the same time, it makes sense. It is. I appreciate you sharing what you have with us, brother. I know it's not something that just rolls off the tongue, and it is. It's really, it's important to hear. It's powerful to hear, and I think it's also cool because as speakers, you and we're not necessarily trying to. I would love to shield people from stuff and protect people from things, but that's an unrealistic goal, right? But I think what you just articulated was powerful, where it's like, because of the work you do, you're on the head of the curve, right? And that's why one of the main reasons I think we do the work we do is that we want people to be able to catch it earlier, right? Here are the warning signs, here are the things. And and obviously, I talk about leadership. I also do a little bit of stuff around mental health, particularly with men, but not nearly to the extent of what you do. But even in some of the leadership work, right? It's like, let me share this story so that you could try to catch yourself from falling into some of these pitfalls of leadership a little bit quicker. And so it's a real gift that you have, to be able to articulate what you have been through, what you're going through, and as a way to help others try to catch it a little bit quicker in themselves as well.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. And something just came to my mind, just as well. It's sort of a through line, but I just want to call attention just for a moment, and we could shift back to. But James, you're a really great facilitator and listener, and a validating force, and you're just really great at this. And I see it coming up in how you present and how you hold space with people, and I just feel really seen and heard. And I just want to just call attention to that while we're live.
Much
it's
love,
important.
man. Much love,
Yeah.
man. I do see you. And yeah, like I said early on in the intro, we don't spend a lot of time together, but I've always felt drawn to you. And so yeah, much respect, brother. And thank you for the love. I will take that compliment and not try to flip it. Sure. Which is not easy for me to do. Anyway, so yeah. I'm wondering, what were some of the roles that you had? I was a theater kid, right? I was the waiter in Havana and Guys and Dolls, right? I was all the way to being Billy Bigelow in Carousel, which is a fascinating mental health role in itself, right? Yeah. The lead character commits suicide. Spoiler alert. Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of roles that I've gotten to do. What were some of your highlights?
Oh man, first of all, I'm having a hard time not singing Carousel right now. I'm like, well, it's coming by gum. You can. I'm having a real hard time with this right now, James. I really wanted to sing some Beauty and the Beast before too. I was like the I Want song, like town in a quiet. Anyway, I loved.
You can go off, mother. You can go off,
dude.
I don't edit, so
I'm working on it. I was in high school. I'll give you my high school stuff. So I was Rusty Charlie in Guys and Dolls, who sings. He has nothing else to do in the show. I mean, unless chorus, but he sings Feud for Tin Horns. So he's one of the three that starts out. I got the horse right here.
Paul Revere.
And so mine was. What was it? His name is Epitaph. He wins by a half, according to this here in the Telegraph. And it's sort of this, around feud.
Can do.
That's it. I was like, wait a minute. My character would never sing this. I don't know. That's my motivation. And my second year, I was Cornelius in Hello Dolly, which was a really fun role. And I got to, my best friend was Barnaby, was my sidekick. So that was fun. We had a drama teacher who was separate from the musicals, and she turned Young Frankenstein into a play, and I played awesome. Just a whole bunch of different characters in that. That was really fun.
That's awesome. Mel Brooks is a legend.
Oh my gosh, that guy! I saw him in a Chinese restaurant in LA a couple years ago. I was like, Danny Zuko in Grease.
Nice, dude.
And then super ensemble in Wizard of Oz. And then I started doing a ton of community theater after that, or during senior year. And then and I did West Side Story twice. I think I did Joseph twice, Camelot, My Fair Lady, Carousel, Fiddler, The Miracle Worker. Played the hearing aid. No, I played the brother. It was an avant-garde production. And then that year at age 19, towards the end of that year of college, I started auditioning professionally, and it was horrible. I was like a stand and sing kind of, I didn't act these songs at all. And I got a role in a summer stock theater, making $150 a week, doing Footloose, the bumbling Willard, and then also Sound of Music. I was Rolf. You
crushed it, brother.
The local newspapers said my portrayal of Rolf was a handsome and sympathetic Nazi, which is this might be a poor choice of words. Yeah. I was like, but thanks. And something else, and that was kind of how things started. But yeah, man, I still love theater. It's one of my first. It's probably my first love. So
it's a rush, man. It is such a rush. That's why I started doing improv. I didn't necessarily have the time to be a part of a full theater production, or didn't make the time to. Let me name it correctly. And so, but improv gave me a little bit of taste of just being on stage and creating with people together. And it's a different fun muscle to work also than theater, but still, that's incredible, man. That's awesome.
So fun.
Hell yeah. So you go to community college for 1 year. Shake hands with the dean, keep it pushing. And then what's the move after community college?
I moved to north-ish Jersey, near Rutgers, actually. So 45 minutes from New York City. Moved in with a friend who was going to Rutgers, and I started auditioning. And was working. I was working. I was waiting tables at two different places, and then I was waiting at one place, and then at the same time was auditioning and going back and taking class. And I started booking a little work here and there. Then I moved to the city with someone who's now my ex-partner, girlfriend, but who's a friend, and we were together for a bunch of years. And I was still waiting tables, and then there was a couple years where I was like doing a ton of theater, and that's all I was doing, and it was cool. And then I started doing voiceover, and then I started writing for the theater and producing theater, and that took me to about age 25. Yeah, so I was juggling all of that stuff about 25, 26.
Yeah. Which is so much to juggle, right? I mean, yourself, even in that, I mean, New York City's not cheap to live in, neither is Jersey. And it's nice that you got a roommate, but still, it's still hard, and waiting tables is what it is. You're no stranger at that point in your life to living with less, right? But it doesn't mean that that's the way you want to be, right?
Not necessarily, no.
And the auditioning process is cutthroat, right? You have to get used to the word no a lot, and that's hard. Yeah, that's such a tough time. How did you combat that?
Not well. Not well. I didn't have. I mean, I had these tools, but I didn't know about them, like the mental health tools, the inquisitive tools, the mental health tools, the resource tools, and so I was doing it on my own. So I would cope by avoiding. I would work, doing whatever. Sometimes it was busy work. I at times I was never like get naked under a bridge drunk, but it was like although no, but
give me the right bridge. No,
give me a bridge too far. But there were times when I was definitely misusing alcohol for sure, just to avoid and things like that. So I would say not super well. Like I wasn't dealing with, like I kind of learned how to deal with rejection a bit, but I think I was keeping busy and I was finding different ways to avoid. And we as humans can find all different ways to avoid ourselves.
Yeah.
And it's not just through substances, and it's not just through work. And so I think it was avoidance, really.
Yeah. That's that makes a lot of sense, right? You you drink or get high or whatever, so that you could be somewhere else or someone else for just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
For sure, whether it's under a bridge naked or not. The time is now.
Different doctor.
So you go from that period of life to what you're doing now is incredible, right? You're traveling around the country. You're working with. I know you definitely work with high school, college students. I'm not sure if you do stuff with adults too. I would assume you do, but you do a lot of stuff around suicide prevention, mental health awareness, giving people those tools that you were talking about that you had but didn't know you had back then. How do we connect those dots for me, brother? How do we get from trying to make it as a New York City actor to traveling around the country and doing what you do, still crushing it on stages, just with your own script?
Yeah. Great question. So around age 25, like I was sort of ready. I was feeling like I was kind of ready to like transition into writing, to transition into something else. Like I was doing a lot of like theater entrepreneurial stuff. I was like getting callbacks for like Jersey Boys and like and like South Pacific and stuff like that. And that was cool. But I was like, it's still not completing the circle for me. And at the same time, around this age, my parents broke up. Good move for both of them. My dad didn't really see it that way. And I really kind of extricated myself from them in that situation, but I would keep tabs on them. They were 3 hours away from me where I was living in New York. And I didn't see them very often, but I kept tabs. And my dad, really took a downward spiral pretty quickly. And so March 31, 2009, the day they were supposed to finalize their divorce in court, my dad died by suicide. And so that was traumatic in a lot of ways. But one, his dad died by suicide in the 1960s. And to the day that my dad died, he didn't know that I knew. My mom told me in secret around age 12 because she was trying to, I think, explain why he was the way he was. And her, I think, thought was like, we're religious, stay together for the kids, right? So all that. But so the transition was after losing my dad, I kind of went on this period of like self-discovery. I took a road trip by myself. I had wanted to get into a playwriting class by the specific teacher that I really, he's not teaching anymore, but he's an amazing like children's TV writer now. But he brilliant writer, but his one-man show class was open. And so I was like, all right, well, I'll take that. And I was already kind of intrigued into it anyway, because I had an acting teacher, intrigued about it because I had an acting teacher who had mentioned that she took this class as well. And so I took his class, and then I took 2 other classes, and I started developing this one-man show in this class. And it ended up having, and I workshopped it, and then I did it in New York City, as a workshop, and then another workshop. And then I put it up in a theater festival in New York City in the middle of 2010, in August of 2010, got some performances out of it and got really good reviews, and got then invited to do it like a year and a half later. And I knew it, and the invitation came almost immediately, but it was like, you can do your show at this theater outside Philly that I'd worked at numerous times. And it's a nice theater. And so that was going well. So it's either a 45-minute piece, a 60-minute piece, or a 75-minute piece, depending on the version that I'm doing. But it's mostly a comedy. There's elements of stand-up in it. There's scene work in it, even though it's a one-man show. It's me from 5 to 25. And the major antagonist is really my dad. And I never in the beginning didn't intend for that to be that way. But the end of the piece is me dealing with his suicide. And at the end, like in New York City, when I was doing it at that theater festival, people were connecting with me afterwards, like my cousin, my grandma, whoever, died by suicide. And we never talked about it. Thanks for doing that. And they would chat with me. And I didn't get it. I didn't get how healing that could be for them. I didn't get any of it. And I tried to hold space, but I wasn't there. And I was like, I'm just trying to do theater. But I was still cool to them. And so fast forward a little bit, and we can unwrap some of this too, but I'm trying to give you the abbreviated version to this, to what your question was. But thank you. But so after doing this show, I enrolled in college, and I was making these changes. My girlfriend breaks up with me, who I'd been with for almost 6 years. My mom more or less sues me and my brother and sister for the inheritance that my dad left us after he passed away. And so I'm losing all these people. I'm going through lots of major change. The beginning of 2011, again, like this is now 6 months or so after I wrote the show, 18, 19 months after I lost my dad, I'm now in suicidal crisis. I wasn't paying attention on my personal hygiene, my mental health hygiene. The breakup was hard. Losing friends and family was hard. Losing my dad was hard because there was an array of emotions, like of grief, of relief, and then being like feeling guilty that I felt relief because this perpetrator was now gone, and so there was all these things that I didn't know I was allowed to feel. And then I started thinking that nobody loved me or cared about me and the world would be better off if I weren't in it. And of course, that's not the case, right? Like my brain was sick, it was sick. All these things were treatable and manageable. I wouldn't wish this period of life on my worst enemy. I really wouldn't. And so for 6 weeks, I started thinking and it progressed, it kept progressing, and I was dwindling, and I was wasting away in my room. And I had come out sometimes, and I would work a little bit. I lost some of the work that I was, I wasn't showing up in certain places that I needed to show up in. And I finally had this epiphany. I nearly attempted suicide, and I had this epiphany, and I was like, wait a minute. I don't think you want to die, Josh. I just don't think you want to be in the emotional pain that you're feeling. And there was a little bit more to that. And I actually found out later that that's a common thread for people who want to die or who express suicidal ideation, thinking and or attempts, is that people don't want to die. They just don't want to feel the pain that they're feeling. And so that didn't make life any easier in that moment, but it was like, okay, so the world expanded just a little bit to maybe I can get help. And so I reached out to my mom, who became my mom again. And so that put us back on the track toward friendship. And then, I was getting help through like neuroscience and self-education and reaching out to people and counseling therapy through my university and intentional acts of service and spirituality, all these different things, right? And so my recovery process was about 9 months to feel like a leveled up version of me. But in the meantime, I had this idea. I was like, I need to be in the service of other people to feel whole again. And so I had this another epiphany one day, and I was like, man, what if I took this one-man show that I had and pair it and get trained and learn about suicide prevention and mental health, because I really wanted to help with that, because I started to find out that other people were struggling, because I thought I was the only one. And then it turns out there's so many people struggling in different ways who kind of go to that similar or same end result that I had been pondering, which is death at my own hands. And so I really wanted to help other people. I was like, man, if I'm me, who looks like me, who presents decently well as a white guy in the United States, access, if I think there's no help, probably other people feel the same way. And it turns out that's the case. And so I was like, let me pair all this stuff together. And so I started pitching it around. I didn't know what I was talking about. I finally figured out how to talk about it, how to, to put it together. And then I got at the college I was attending, and I was pitching it to like Oregon. I was pitching it to like University of Florida. I mean, all these places. And they were like, yeah, what? And then finally, I got some traction. My professor, not my professor, but a professor at the college I was attending in New York City, Brew College, he was like, hey, this seems interesting. And he enlisted some students in Psychology Honor Society. And there was some oversight, and, there was counselors on board, and I had it filmed, and I put it together, and I didn't know how it was going to go. It was in a lecture hall. I'd never done theater in a lecture hall before, much less anything else. And, and then some young man waited till the very end after everything was done. And I said what I had to say, and I shared what I had to share. And we had the Q&A with some of the professors and things. And he was like, thanks for doing this. I've been, depressed for as long as I can remember and suicidal for a couple of weeks or months. And I thought it was normal. I know it's not. I'm going to go get help at the counseling center. I was like, whoa, I got to keep doing this. And so the base of my work really started out as the one-man play.
Yeah. Brother, what a journey. What a journey.
Yeah, a little bit.
Incredible that it came back to you acting, right? The one-man play. And the fact that you took that course of that gentleman that you had admired, the playwright or writer or whatever he was, right, that you took his one-man play or one-man show course. That's a bit serendipitous, that's what you wound up creating, and the power of someone taking a shot on you, right? The person at your school. And, there was so much in there. And there's this whole, I feel like in that period of life that I asked you to kind of talk about, your journey with your mother was like all over the place, right? And that's incredible that mom was a mom when you needed her to be the mom the most.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever happened before, we don't necessarily need to get into today, but whatever happened before, the fact that she showed up for you in that moment. I think a lot of times it's scary to go back to someone like that who we don't know what the status of our relationship is, right? And if that conversation goes well, if that conversation doesn't go well, I don't know where we are today, right? And I know that. So that was a powerful moment as well. And thank you for sharing your dad's story, your family's history, your own history with suicide as well. I know you talk about it, but that doesn't mean it's easy. Right. I know you've dealt with a lot of it and your own counseling journey, your own reflection, your own everything. But like you said earlier, there's still parts of your dad's death that you wrestle with. And I'm sure there's still parts of your own and potential end of your life that you wrestle with. And once it starts to work, right? Once you get this great feedback and you have this amazing student that has the courage to come up to you and say, "Hey, thank you. I'm thinking this, and now I'm realizing that maybe there's some more. Maybe I haven't tried everything yet. Maybe there's some other resources for me. Maybe I'm not crazy. Maybe I'm not alone. Maybe I can find love or worthiness." And from that to what you now do around the country is incredible. And I'm sure you've had many more people come up to you and share some stories like that, or stories about how their brother or their friend or their dad or their mom, right? Like the stories that you have heard because of the work that you do, they got to be the wind in the sails that keep you pushing.
Definitely. I mean, I think stories are why I do what I do. It started with my story, but it's all these other stories, and it's a big reason why I started the Impossible Project. I was like, let me share other people's stories on top of my own. Let me make storytelling a priority, because when we tell stories, it's no longer they and them, it's we and us, right? And there's elements of science that I could talk about, that what stories do to our brain, and what it leads our feet to do, and walking and making moves and taking action, right? But just hearing, like, and I have, people who I now call friends, not just colleagues, not just past whatever, but friends who, like, I came to your thing that night and I didn't die, and now our family looks like this instead. Or I was going to kill myself that night and I literally had it, like, and then this person, then became a friend and is now an educational counselor in a college setting. So she uses some of she does have a mental health counseling background, which is an educational counselor. So she uses some of that. I also helped her produce her book, and things like that. So, I mean, that kind of stuff is super rewarding. And just to know that people are alive and kicking it no one can ever take that away. And that's, it's exactly why I do what I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful, man. That's beautiful. I've dealt with suicide in my life as well. I had my cousin committed suicide when I was fairly young. He was the oldest cousin on my mom's side, and so the oldest grandchild, and he took his life. And I remember. I think I was either in high school or early college when it happened. And so I had some awareness of mental health, and I remember kind of going through something, but I also, he wasn't necessarily someone who I was super close with, just because of time and space, and our age difference was huge. There's like 20 years between us almost. But I still remember his funeral, and like it was when like Soul Asylum was popping, and Runaway Train was on in the limousine as we were going out to the funeral home and stuff like that. And like, you remember those moments, or you remember the feeling. And I remember my uncle and my cousins who were, his siblings. And then, fast forward to the work that I do in residence life, there are a few times where unfortunately we lost some residents to that. And you always, your first question is why, your second question is what could we have done? And then nothing ever gets answered. And you talked about something really, you touched on it briefly when you talked about men and mental health, and your own journey as a male with it. And I think, we as men and mental health, we crave belonging, yet we often run from love. For whatever reason, right? I think men aren't necessarily, I think we're getting better as a society. I think men are allowed to feel things. Are getting more and more allowed to feel things, which is amazing. And I credit a lot of social media. I think social media, as much as it's probably hurt people's mental health, in some ways it's also helped a lot too, in the normalization of therapy, of things like that. And so, when it comes down to being men, a lot of times, so I think it's not that men aren't taught to feel. I think men are still taught to be internal processors. right? I think men are still taught to don't present your product, present your, don't present your process, present your product. And that's still tough. And like that thing of like, I'm not deserving to talk about it or worthy to talk about it unless I've been like, and here's what I'm going to do about it, or here's what I did do about it.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that in some of your work with men? And I know that's not only men,
Right.
but in the work that you've done and thinking about yourself and your process, have you noticed some of that?
For sure. I think, I think a lot of what you said is pretty spot on. I think, a lot of men and a lot of people, first of all, so all that framework exists, right? And then there's and some of that, elaborating some of what you talked about, I'm not valuable unless I'm producing something, right? And if I'm not at my best and I'm feeling like I might want to die, well, I can't produce. So I have no value, right? And if I have no value, then what good am I? I'm a burden, right? And so burden is often what people talk about when they talk about dying. And I think, for me as a man, like I get that too. I get it now. I get that, and that's part of the man. That's part of some recent processing. That's part of a difficult experience that I've had recently. And that's part of like this ongoing process. Like, my value is not in what I produce. My value is in the quality of relationships that I have and the people who I help and the good things that I bring to the table, and things like that, and how I'm showing up in the world. It's not always about how I produce, right? So we need to start to check in on on how we value ourselves and how we display our value, right? Because so there's that. And I think also with men and people in general, there's this idea, like this need of reciprocity, right? So and it's innate, right? Like in saber-tooth tiger times, if you weren't cooking the meal, then you better have caught it. And if you didn't catch it, you better tell the story about it. And if you can't do none of that, you better get out, And so there's this because we're a cohabitive tribal sort of a species, as it were. And so that's stayed in our brains and our bodies for this entirety, as long as we've been Homo sapiens, I suppose. But when people don't experience, when they like, I'm in trouble, I'm in crisis, I'm feeling less than my best, I can't talk about it because then that person might expect something else from me. They might want something from me. They might use it against me, right? There's all these different things. And so for me, it's like, we got to, we've got to work on finding the people in our world, and not just one person, but at least two people who we can like lean on to a degree, not in a professional sense, but some, people we can get perspective from. As men, as people, we need multiple, who we can dive deep in, who we can have conversations, right? And then also know that by asking for help, we're actually offering that other person to have a sense of value, right? Because and meaning and purpose. Because how do you feel when you help somebody else? You feel a sense of value, a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose. Don't be hogging those good feelings. Don't be doing that. That's not for you to do. So we just kind of have to flip the script a little bit and how we think about reciprocity and help and paying it forward. And I don't know what it means to be a man, James. I really don't. I honestly do not know what it means. I know what it means and what it looks like on me, but I don't even know if that's what it actually means. But as a human, I think we need to reconceive some of these long held and sometimes erroneous things that are no longer serving us.
Yeah. Erroneous. Great word. That was the drinking game for today. Every time we say erroneous. Chug your water.
That's the name of my other band.
It's a great band name, actually. That's a great
Ellipses.
Yeah, man. What you just said is so astute, and it's so easy. It's easier said than done. Obviously, changing the perceptions of what does it mean to be men, right? Like I'm doing a mental health session for some construction workers in May or June, and there's part of me that's like super scared about it, right? Because because I just, this is as adults, we're also getting deeper and deeper into our own patterns and our own thoughts. And adults are also closer to having parents that were raised in more traditional mindsets and et cetera, right? And so, but it is something that is so powerful to talk about. And, obviously the suicide rate in men is much higher than that in women. Sadly, especially in young women are catching up, which is not good. That doesn't mean there's less men committing suicide, right? There's just more women. And that's horrifying. And but still, there are still more men that are taking their lives than women. And as we think about the prevention work, we can think about some of the individual stuff that we can do where it's like, hey, get your buddy to a counselor or just get your buddy talking, or let them know that they're worthy, set up plans with them, and have conversations, and just, kind of be that, I like to say that commitment is patience plus persistence. And we need to be, commitment is that with our friends as well that are going through, like we need to let people have their own process. But we don't just need to be like, I checked in on you once, I'm fine. Right. Like there has to be a persistent, coming back to people. And so, so when you think about some of the work that folks can be doing for people around them in mental health, what are some of the little things that you could say that someone can do to help somebody if they're just like, hey, I noticed that so-and-so's patterns have changed, or they're just kind of feeling down, or the way they're talking about themselves, their self-narrative has changed. What are some tips that you have for people to start some of those conversations, damn well knowing that most likely that person will either try to avoid, get defensive, or ignore, that first attempt, especially.
For sure. Yeah, I think a big gift that we can give each other, I think one of the big gifts, and there's a lot of ways to say this, but you notice somebody going through multiple major changes, or you notice somebody going through a hard time, or you notice somebody, you just pull them aside and you start the conversation along the lines of, I know you're going through this, this, and this. I want to let you know that I see you. It must be incredibly difficult, validate what they're going through, because people who go through it, that really deep level suicidal crisis, one of the things that they experience, and me included, is that you don't feel seen or heard or understood in a very long time. And so you're just kind of planting a seed there. It might take you down that path, but it's a very non-confrontational, very easy way. And then you could even take it a step further and maybe ask permission and just say like, hey, can I share with you something that I see of you? And they don't have to believe you. It doesn't have to be that way, because sometimes when we're in a dark place, we don't see the good things about us, the healthy things, but it's like, you're still suiting up and showing up. You're a good friend to me. Like, you're still taking care of your kid, even though you're going through this, this, and this, right? So validating and then letting know that you see them, and coming from that strengths-based place of like, whoa, like there's still good things happening in your world. And you're not doing that to necessarily so that they can see that perspective in that moment, or that they totally agree with your perspective, but it's to say like, hey, other people have other perspectives. I think that's a big one. I think being willing to ask the big question, are you thinking of suicide? Could be, depending on the acuity, the severity of the crisis or the difficulty that you're seeing. And then I think also, like, in terms of like just letting someone know that you care about them, letting them know that how important they are to you is really, really important. Not from a shaming place, but just like, I just really, really deeply respect you and care about you. Things like that can go a really, really long way. And then I think on a little bit more of a macro level, we also need to start looking at this as a societal issue rather than an individual issue, because it's both, and we really often shift the burden of this on the person. But yet, suicide is a multi-pronged thing. And so, we need to start looking at food insecurity. We need to start looking at cultural and systemic bullying. We need to start looking at food deserts. We need to start looking at sexual violence. We need to start looking at wars. We need to start looking at all these other things that cause, because suicide is about hopelessness. It's not about bad, crazy, weird, sinful, anything like that, right? So if it's about all these things, then it's also about the box we live in. And so it's about making that box more tolerable, if not amazing, for as many people as possible. So we need to look at it both from a systemic issue and also as an individual thing that we can just like show up for people.
Yeah. First off, I know you weren't trying to do this, but like it was a really beautiful call out. Is that and the way you put it was that it's not just an individual thing, right? It's also we got to look at the systems that are around us and how those are feeding to it. As you put, it's about these systems, how they've created situations where people feel hopeless and forgotten, and yeah, that is. That's incredibly powerful. I guess I never thought about it in that way. I mean, I know that all those things attribute to it, but to the way that you put it is that it's not necessarily an individual issue. It's so much bigger than that. And you're right. We often do see suicide as just that person blank, right? They were going through this, and whatever. And that is inappropriate. And often misnamed. I mean, don't get me wrong. That's not to say that there aren't such individuals like that, but still, yes. What are the contributing factors? What are the things that built up that person to a level of hopelessness to where it's like, well, this is the only way out? That's powerful to think about. And I know something that you are famously a pretty solid cook, and you also enjoy cooking for others. You're going back to your pesto condiment pro tip, but I know that you also have attacked some of this work through food and mental health. Can you tell us a little bit more about kind of what you're trying to do there and what that piece of your work looks like?
Yeah, so thank you for asking. Yeah, so I'm doing stuff around food and mental health. So I'm also like a little side hustle. We didn't even talk about this in the intro, but like I do a lot of a fair amount of ghostwriting and editing and book stuff, book producing and things along these different lines. So a couple of years ago, I worked on a nutrition guide as a ghostwriter and basically wrote it, but had to do all this research and it was on healthy, nutritious food and things like that. And so a lot of it was like, this is what this food does, and this is what it does to dopamine and serotonin, and this has neuroprotective factors, and this reduces inflammation, and this is what these things do. And so I was like, oh my gosh, and then I started noticing what food was doing to my brain when I was intentional about the kinds of foods that I consumed during a major episode of anxiety. A prolonged episode of anxiety a couple of years ago. And I was like, oh my gosh, I want to, if we could, flip the script a little on food and make it about being a nourishing coping skill, rather than this is just something we do, or it's something we have no control over. And then I realized not a lot of people know how to cook. And I've sort of studied that. And I have a little bit of a food background as well, like working in kitchens and things like that. And so the idea is when we eat healthy, nutritious, or when we eat more nutritious food, we're going to have a more nourished body and brain. And so it's not about weight. It's not about size. It's not about, and it's also in mind, keeping in mind food insecurity and things like that, and food trauma and all that, because not everyone has the same kind of access to food. So my goal and what I'm doing, and I'm doing some presentations around this already, is combining a little bit of my story with, as a presentation, a little bit of my story with the basics of mental health, with food as a coping skill, with some science, and then sharing like a couple of foods to limit in terms of refined white sugar, flour, things like that, unless you're cooking it yourself, right? And then things, certain foods to get closer to. And so some of those foods, it depends, like if it's a community college and they have a certain food in their pantry, then I'll highlight that food. And then I'll also leave them with a recipe for each. And then I haven't been able to do a live cooking demo yet, but a pre-recorded cooking demo and the one I have at the moment is how to cook a minestrone soup, and just making it really easy and healthy and nutritious, but comforting, right? So I want people to enjoy doing these things. I want them to be able to, even if they're experiencing food insecurity, like, what can we add to a thing of ramen to make it a little more nutritious? Can we throw a couple of spinach leaves in it, maybe a sprinkle of turmeric? If we eat something that's like a can of soup, Progresso, or something that might tend to have a lot of sodium in it, right? Well, how do we counterbalance that? Okay, so cut it with some citrus, or eat a banana, as part of the meal, because it'll soak up a lot of that sodium. Throw some potatoes in it, right? So little hacks and stuff too. And then the next goal is to, and I'm slowly compiling this, but is to release a mental health themed cookbook that focuses on, nourishing comfort foods. And so a lot of them will start from as much as possible, like a vegan base, but then you can add a meat, you can add, a dairy if you so choose, but it starts from that place because, food allergies and food ethics and what certain people value in terms of eat meat, don't eat meat, kind of thing. So, so just trying to keep all that in mind as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I'm
crazy,
doing,
brother.
Yeah.
I'm someone who, for most of my life, and I'd probably say even now, like whenever someone's like, oh, my blood sugar's low, or oh, I got to do this, and not diabetic, there's people that's just like aware of their bodies. I'm always like, I don't know what that feels like, right? Like, cannot compute, right? And so,
Yeah.
and so it's fascinating to me to hear you talk about this, where it's like, certain foods will change our moods, and not just like, I need some chocolate right now. Or obviously, like, oh, I had a tough day, all I want is a bowl of pasta, right? Like, not necessarily that kind of, not that level of changing your mood, but more so, like you said, like, counterbalancing some of the things that are in some of the foods we already eat, and how can we make sure we're increasing this, and what are foods are impacting our serotonin and dopamine levels. Like, that's stuff I've never even thought about. And so I hope you do drop that cookbook on them, brother, because that's intriguing, man. That is super intriguing. And I also appreciate you saying that, I'm a big fan of the Hayes movement, right? The health at any size. And so, I love that you're like, I'm not trying to, this isn't weight loss. This is a mental health cookbook, which is, I've never seen anything like that before. And that's a super cool idea, man. Thanks for the work you're doing.
Thanks, homie. Appreciate that, man. Yeah.
Oh yeah, brother. Josh, man, it's been so cool talking to you, man. I respect the hell out of you, dude. I love your angle. I love your vulnerability. And the work that you do is beautiful. As it is tragic, right? Because I know that we can't save everybody as much as we'd love to be able to, and so I just want to say thank you for coming and hanging in the diner, and thank you for sharing what you did with us today, man.
Thanks, brother, man. I enjoyed every minute, man. It was always really nice to spend time with you, brother.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Much love, man. Hey, Josh, let people know where can they stay in touch with you, man? How are we keeping up with Joshua Rivedal?
Go with joshuarivedal.com. It's on the screen. It's probably a good place to go. I'm not super active on social media. It's just hard for me to do that. But I'm there. You could reach me if you want. Facebook, Instagram. Those are probably the big ones. Twitter. I was gonna make a parlor joke, but I decided not to. Stayed away. I mean, there's lots of ways you can find me all over the web. Seriously, I Google myself often. No, I don't. But
yeah, the I'm Possible project, right? It's apostrophe M possible, but it's all one word, right?
Yeah, I am. So IamPossibleProject.com is sort of more of the business website. And there's not a lot of food. There's no food stuff on there yet, but but it's stuff I'm talking about and doing. And when I'm ready to talk about it in that forum, I'll get there.
Yeah. You're right. You're damn right, brother. Well, man, much love, brother. Thank you again for coming through the diner, dude.
Thanks, homie. This is a
Hell
lot
yeah.
of fun.
Hell yeah. Y'all, that was my time with my boy Joshua Rivedal. Just a great freaking man, a storyteller. A man pisses compassion and oozes wisdom. And it gave me a lot to think about as far as whether it's the way we're approaching suicide prevention as a society, and also as an individual, and thinking about like, do I help this one person, or what are the things behind it that we also need to be working on at the same time. Just incredible stories of forgiveness and trauma. And I just respect the hell out of that, man. And I'm so glad that you all wanted to hang out with us in the diner today. Make sure you keep up with his work. It's really incredible. And I'm gonna buy that cookbook as soon as it comes out, because I'm always working on ways to tweak my mental health strength. Yeah, much love, y'all. Thanks for coming to the diner. And until the next time we get to hang out, y'all, do me a favor and keep punching small talk in the face by asking better questions. You all take